go do that.
I'll follow y'all's lead. Just tell me what you want.
Okay, I just was alerting you that we will be live, so
Okay.
even though it's pre-show, it won't end up in the podcast while we're chatting now before we start. Whatever you say, we'll be live.
Okay.
All right, I'm running the restroom real quick.
Okay, I do that. Let me make sure you can hear this.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.
Yes.
Okay. And you have the notes, so you know our little format and can see where we are.
Yeah.
Although it
And
just kind of turns into conversation.
Yeah, I noticed that. I that's part of why I listened to a lot of your podcasts this week, to try to make sure that I was familiar with how y'all sound and things like that. So
Yeah, Barney has a lot of links in here.
yeah, and I did not have a chance to look at all of them. So y'all just ask questions, and if I don't know the answer, I'll let y'all know.
And I haven't looked at any of them.
No, me either.
They're nice for putting in the show notes, but other than that, I try to avoid clicking so that doesn't end up in there. But thirsty. I should maybe look at some of them now. Well, I'm sure. I mean, he's put stuff about legality of polyamory, and I run across those discussions all the time. Ooh,
Yeah,
that queer theology one. That looks interesting.
That kind of stuff, I mean, is more like if you need to make it legal for some reason, like child rearing or property or things like that. I mean, there's no law, at least in the States, as far as I know, against being polyamorous. You just can't marry more than one person.
Well, sort of, because we have estrangement laws that you could use in North Carolina if things went bad.
Yeah.
Which people do, because people suck.
Yeah. With a lot of these things, it's everything just seems to, like, I know more people that have been just happy doing relationship things the way they want to, and then a child becomes involved, and that's when it becomes to be a problem. Usually child custody battles or things like that. It's like the lifestyle isn't a problem until somebody wants to use it as a weapon against another person.
And that's the same in monogamous relationships very often. So.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
Yeah,
People suck. People just suck.
I was involved in that situation as far as children is concerned. I was part of a poly relationship, sort of poly relationship, and they had a child from a previous relationship, and that individual used that against the individual I was dating because I was dating them, and this was in the 2000s, so it was. They basically lost full custody of the child, and it was just really bad. And then I was accused of sexually assaulting one of the children. So yeah, that was fun.
That's great.
So I've been in and out of this for a while myself. So it's like,
Yeah. My struggle is having couples privilege screamed at me when a lot of times it's just like, well, I mean, I'm sorry, but we have a house and kids and you're new.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We need a little time before, you show up at the house or even know my address.
Yeah. Well, and I can understand that, especially with some of the problems you've had in the past as well with certain individuals that we will.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm just like, it's one of those things where you have to be careful, and it's almost like, this should be part of the discussion. We will, go over that.
This is for the show.
Yeah, this is for. Yeah, we're talking about the show during the show, so it's like before the show.
Like, this is the pre-show, the show before the show.
Yeah, this is the show before.
Yes.
Now,
I may very well make a separate audio file and leave this in it and give it to the patrons only.
That would be nice. Yeah,
that's fine.
That all three of them. Oh my god! I want more patrons, and one of them is September. So it's like, But
Hey, well,
can she hear? Can she hear the? You want to try a
offering.
bumper?
Yes, I tested that.
Okay.
Yes.
Um,
Okay.
but I mean, that's the thing. Offering patrons something a little different, a little more, is
Yeah.
that's how you get more.
I have a question. How are you at editing our podcast to where like a small chunk can be removed every week? Is that too much work for you? Because what I'd like to do is be able to remove the carrot and stick and put it like on our YouTube page as a separate thing versus us. That way it's a shorter thing where people be like, oh, this is what they're about, kind of thing. You know what I'm saying?
Okay, and you want to put just that up there instead of.
Well, right now, I think because it's a smaller clip, just to kind of because people will be more apt to listen to the smaller. We can discuss it, but that was just running through my brain. It's like, well, maybe do the carrot and stick so they kind of get a feel of how we handle situations, and then they'll be like, oh, here's their main podcast, kind of thing.
If we were both in video, it would be worth going through all the video editing to pull it out.
Okay, all right,
Pulling
yeah,
it as an audio clip and putting on Twitch as an audio clip. I don't know if there's. I mean, do people go to YouTube for just audio clips unless it's music?
they do for podcasts and stuff, yes. It's mostly like from what I've seen, it's like wrestling podcasts and stuff. So it's one of those situations where they'll do like little clips of wrestling podcasts and stuff.
All right.
Uh, I'm sure Meredith will, Jim Cornette does that quite often, and I don't listen to Jim Cornette anymore, but he would do that. So, and he's fairly popular, so where he would do small clips.
Yeah, YouTube's always good if you're trying to increase your reach.
Well, we put
If
all
you
our
can put a
shows
little
there.
something on YouTube, that always works really well. The shorts have been amazing. I'm trying to grow my YouTube channel, and I was, would get like one or two subs a week, which I thought was great. But then about a couple weeks ago, I put up a short, and that short's been seen over 3,000 times, something like that. And I've
Nice.
gotten 72 subscribers from it, which is like crazy to me. So definitely, if you're trying to increase your reach on YouTube, definitely look into the shorts.
Okay.
I'll definitely start doing that, and I'm also trying to do a little more on TikTok as well, and expand there. So I didn't have time to do it today, but I did hey, come and watch our show yesterday. So
Alrighty.
Yeah, and if you're doing it for TikTok anyhow, Shorts is YouTube's attempt at being TikTok.
right,
So if you're doing it for TikTok anyhow, you might as well just also do it for Shorts at the same time and send it over there separately.
yeah, I'm thinking that's what I'm going to do so we can expand this some. We're
Yeah.
closing in on 100, so at this point we really should start expanding at this point.
Okay, we ready?
All right, we are ready.
Okay.
Evil is amongst us. Stay back, boy. This calls for divine intervention. I kick ass for the Lord.
Solomon, he had 700 wives of royal birth and 300 concubines. 1 Kings 11:3.
Money buys protection. It buys time off and privacy, and it buys nice, pretty shit. Money also buys food, housing, and health care. Getting paid enough to meet our needs and more feels good. I'm not romanticizing the sex industry. I know it has risks. I'm just not going to romanticize economic deprivation in the name of being a good girl either. So, do sex workers feel pleasure at work? Yeah, because you know what feels amazing? Surviving capitalism. Adrienne Marie Brown, Pleasure Activism, The Politics of Feeling Good. So let's talk about sex work, polyamory, and the world it's in.
Welcome to Heresy and Hearsay, a podcast to reclaim faith in the context of political discussion. I'm Reverend Barney, and you can follow us at can follow me at Seth Roth II, and you can follow the show's Twitter by just looking up Heresy and Hearsay. Heresy and Hearsay has a Patreon site that you can find at patreon.com/heresy and hearsay, where you can where you can find past shows as well as possibly other content and a way to help us. Just $2 a month goes a long way to help make this humble show. And with me, my co-host today, Mistress September.
Well, hello. I'm September, or 9 of 12, and you can follow me on Twitch and Twitter at 9 of 12. That's NINEOF12. I'm also co-host of the Geek Grills podcast. We record live on our Twitch channel, where you can always join us and contribute with bits or subscribe for free with Amazon Prime. You can also follow the show on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, any podcast catcher you like to use. Just look for Heresy and Hearsay. And if you'll give us a review, that really helps others find us. If you haven't yet, take a look at our website. It's at heresyandhearsay.com, and you can find all our past shows and bios about each of us.
So this week, we are going to be discussing about polyamory and sex work, and we have a special guest with us today. Miss Sparkles, will you say hello to the audience?
Hi, everybody. I am Meredith Sparkles, and I come from Charlotte, and I've been performing burlesque since around 2008. But I've also been in a polyamorous relationship for going on 5 years, and I was born in a very small conservative town in Western Pennsylvania and did 7 years hard time in fundamentalist Baptist Christian school. So it's just really nice to meet you all. And also in my youth, I did quite a bit of pro dame work. So thank you for having me. It's great to be here, and I'm looking forward to the discussion. Hi, everybody.
Hi, and thank you so much for joining us. And I've known Meredith for quite a number of years. I won't say how many, but it's been longer than I've known September. So that's oh. Okay. So anyways, but I met Meredith when she was doing a LARP game of Vampire the Masquerade, and we've been friends ever since. And I've not been involved with her career, but I know about her career and followed her burlesque career for ever since she started burlesque. So uh, it's been so I have been in that world of sex work on the peripheral, um, but so I can attest to some things about it as well. Um, but so before we do a discussion about that, we typically do a mental health check. What we're trying to do to keep ourselves mentally healthy through all the politics and everything else we go through. So, why don't we start with our guest? What have you been doing to kind of keep your mental health in check this week, if anything?
Well, I am recovering. I was exposed to COVID on January 11th, which was my birthday, and and what tested positive on the 13th. So I have been trying to recover after 2 weeks of basically not having any energy at all. I'm vaccinated and boosted. Omicron got me. I thought I was being really careful, but things happen. And so I kind of lost like maybe close on 2 weeks of time. So my mental health's not been great, and I'm concentrating on trying to recover from that. I try to do about 10 to 15 minutes of fun movement every day. I love YouTube videos. And I found some really fun channels. So I just do 10 to 15 minutes of really nice movement. And I've been trying to make sure I go outside and get at least a few minutes in the sunlight every day, to just try to regain some energy and kind of reset myself. So I'm just kind of checking in, making sure I'm doing everything I need to do to get back to 100%.
That is, and I understand that it's no fun to get COVID. Knock on wood. I have not been. I've been exposed but have not gotten it, so I've been lucky on that front. And I'm sorry that you got it, but at least you're vaccinated and boosted, and therefore it reduces the risks, and I'm grateful for that, or the risks of more dangerous infection, I should say. So
Yeah,
that's.
I consider myself very lucky and very blessed.
And what about my partner September? What have you been doing?
I scheduled a massage for next week.
Hey, that's awesome.
Ooh,
Yeah,
those are nice.
someone posted on Nextdoor they had gotten a package for their wife for Christmas and she couldn't use it. And so I gave him a call, and it was this lovely little man that met me downtown. So I'm doing this Queen for a Day at Rock Barn. And they've got like a salt cave thing now. And so I'm really looking forward to that. I need it. I've had a lot of bad pain days recently, including yesterday, um, which is holy cow. So that was like for my mental health, looking forward to that and doing something for me. And Rob's like, Happy Valentine's Day, get it, get it, get it, which really helps. And other than that, not a lot activity wise, just kind of trying to be a little more social as I can. Um, I I know so many people getting COVID right now, whether boosted or vaxxed or not. One friend of mine, I mean, she's a nurse. She's exposed so often. It's amazing. She hadn't before brought it home. And my friend Eric got it for the second time. And my friend Leanne has it again, or has it. This is her first bout with it, but she's been exposed so many times because she works in daycare. And sometimes I feel like a jerk when I just go to have a pint. And I just try not to beat myself up for it because, I mean, I'm distancing as I can and I know who I'm sitting with and what their exposure is. And I have no compunctions about saying, are you vaxxed? If somebody wants to sit with me, there aren't hugs unless you've been vaxxed. Because there have been certainly exposures and close calls, and I've escaped it so far, and I don't know how my body will react. So
Yeah, I thought I was being really careful. We went out for my birthday to a very small place. There were 6 people in the entire establishment, and we were all spread out. It just, the 4 of us that were there together, we all, the person behind the bar didn't know he was asymptomatic, and he was really sorry and notified us right away. And and we were all vaxxed, and most of us were boosted. So, but I mean, we were being careful. We were doing what you're supposed to do.
mm-hmm.
We were masked and vaxxed and boosted in a small place and spread out, and we still got it. So,
Yeah,
you know,
Omicron is just so much more transmissible. I actually bought. I mean, I've been making cloth masks since the pandemic and been very happy with that. But I bought some N95s this week to double up.
I did as well. I don't want it again. I don't
I
want it
don't doubt
again.
it.
I've been using September's masks, and they've been working fairly well. So right now, so I
So
do
far,
need
so
to get
good.
it. Yeah, and they're Wonder Woman masks because, of course, it's me. So I was just that. So for me myself, as far as that's concerned, I've been delving into some D&D stuff, working on my own D&D stuff, maybe possibly running a game, and also playing D&D. I have discovered that digital dice rollers are of the devil, and I refuse to use them anymore. They are. I roll. We played last night, and I rolled three three critical misses in a row, and it was the same. And I'm just like, no, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm sending pictures of my dice rolls to the DM, going, here's my dice roll. I did not pay $200 for my Ginny D wormwood dice for them to sit in the case and not be used at this point. And I'm like, digital dice are the devil. I've been considering also getting back into like WoW Classic because of the fact that Bobby Kotick is going to be leaving and it's been purchased by Microsoft, and that makes me at least a little happy. And also, they're starting to unionize, so I may be willing to give them money again. So I'm still debating that right now. So, and if Saturday is one of the big wrestling days, which is the Royal Rumble, which is always a lot of fun. I think it's the best big wrestling event because of the fact it's just so unpredictable and so fun, and it has been every year, um, except for 2015. But we don't discuss that. So that being said, before we get into our subject today, Brother Bowie, will you lead us in a word of prayer?
Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us the trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Thank you, Brother Bowie. So, where the conversation is going to be broken up into two parts. The first part is going to be about polyamory, what it means, everything else, and then the second is going to be about sex work. And we're going and do, and those should be, they're connected in a way because these are new things that have been, they're not new. Let me rephrase that. They're not new things, but these are topics that are coming to the front as far as both in a political structure and as well as a religious structure. I see a lot of conversation on the religious forums about the polyamory and how that's being problematic for how do you discuss that, especially with the Old Testament and how many wives everybody had. So, and that's a little different, but so September or Meredith, can you give us a definition of the types of polyamory versus the polyamory versus open relationships, for example?
Well, that's a rather deep subject. I participate in a lot of poly boards, and let me tell you, there's a lot of discussion about these types of terms. Um, Basically, the consensus is mostly polyamory is actually loving each partner individually. Whereas an open relationship is kind of like, well, you can have sexual relations with another person, but you come home to me and you can't really have a full relationship with the other person in the same way that that you could if it were a polyamorous where there's literally concurrent relationships running and they're full relationships, full love relationships. Whereas an open marriage type situation is generally more based around the sexual aspects of it and not so much the romantic entanglements of a full relationship.
Mm-hmm.
I really like the term ENM, ethical non-monogamy, because there are so many terms that float around in this field, and polyamory has issues with people say poly, and then Polynesian people feel a little stepped on, and people get polyamory mixed up with polygamy, which is an entirely different practice. Well, not entirely, but mostly different practice that refers to a specific lifestyle. And ethical non-monogamy, I think, covers very well that you're in non-monogamous relationships and they require consent of all parties.
That's I like that terminology. Now, full disclosure, all three of us are or have been in polyamorous relationships in the past. So we all have experiences with that, both good and bad. Pardon me. And so it's one of those things where we we have some general knowledge, but we also have some personal experiences for this. So I just wanted everybody to be aware that we're coming from this from a place of we've been in this, we have experienced this in our own ways, and some of it is good, some of it's bad. uh, the big push right now is trying to get it to where it is. There's an, for example, if I'm in a poly relationship and they are in a and they're in a committed relationship with someone else, and that relationship is a legal relationship, then at that point, if there is any hospitalizations or anything else, I have no rights as an individual, and that's something that they're talking about trying to fix, as well as it just being not used against someone. That's the other big thing. That
Yeah, the
was something that was the
stigmatization, I mean, it's very similar to same-sex relationships have undergone for years and years with those particular sort of legal issues that you run into with, hospitalizations and property. But there hasn't been any legal recourse for non-monogamous relationships to ease those paths and ease the stigma.
Yeah,
right. Go
a,
ahead.
a lot of the poly people that I know actually utilize a lot of the same resources that same-sex partners utilized before same-sex marriage was legal. Um, as far as life choices, like who can come and see me in the hospital and things like that, there's actually legal documents that you can get drawn up. A lot of people, unfortunately, don't think about those documents until something has happened and they're needed. But a lot of the poly people that I know that are trying to make things as legal as possible do utilize a lot of the same types of attorneys and documents that same sex couples used prior to their marriages being legal.
Right, and we'll have some links to some of that discussion, as well as there's a polyamory legal advocacy coalition. So there'll be a link for them in our files, because I think it's important that, you know, just because it's non-traditional doesn't mean it's not a good relationship or it's a loving relationship. Um, and poly's not for everybody. If you're not poly, and I know plenty of people who aren't comfortable with that idea at all, it's monogamy all the way, and that's just how they feel. That's the But on the other hand, there are those who feel, this is me speaking, but it's like I can genuinely love in an equal way more than one person in my life, and it each person brings something different to the table as far as my relationships are concerned, and I bring something different to them, and that's why it works out that way. And what's even more interesting is I know of at least a couple of people who are in poly relationships who are also, their partner is monogamous, but they themselves are poly, and that's an interesting dynamic as well. Anyone want to discuss or talk about that? That would be a no. All right.
Silence ensues.
That would be a
I'm
no. No one
almost,
would.
all right. I find myself trying to pick out whether I am going to end up in that position myself, because my husband just gets wild hairs and has to run off with someone he gets attracted to, and I am intellectually that is perfectly sound, and I just, okay, let's discuss our boundaries, and as long as I'm in the loop, that's fine. But what he thinks is in the loop, and I mean, we've ended up in therapy trying to make sure our communication gets better, because that's the first rule is communication, and he's bad at it. But I also am very, my attractions, when they do happen, are based in a deep connection, an emotional connection. So it doesn't happen very often, and I'm honestly just so happy in this relationship. We've been married for 21 years, or 22 years, whatever. It's confusing because it was 1999. And I don't need anything more. I mean, I've run into a handful of, people over the years, like, oh, I'd like to go on a date with them or something, but I'm too old for this shit. Like, dating is stupid. Like, it's not worth all that just drama and grief. And so I'm just happy I'm kind of monogamish. Like, most of the time I just don't even think about it. So a lot of our relationship has become like that, where it's acknowledging what his needs are and what my needs are and trying to just keep on an even track. But I mean, I think I'm just not as open to poly and ready for it and needing or wanting it like I did when I was younger. That was the ideal. I'm bi, I'm pan, whatever. That didn't exist at the time, the term. And I always thought, like, oh, I'll find a nice couple and, settle down. And it just seemed ideal. Like, everybody can share water and drink deep and never thirst and all of that. And that was an ideal. And had a lot of crappy experiences, a couple of good ones, and multiple person relationships. But I just don't have it in me. I don't think about it. Like, if a bolt out of the blue came along, or my comet, who I only see every 10 years, I mean, we can go have a little, tryst with everybody's consent and knowledge, but I'm, like, mostly monogamous at this point just because I don't care. I guess that's not the same, but it's where I am. And it's a challenge when your partner is like, ooh, shiny, ooh, shiny, ooh, shiny all the time. To be monogamous and keep faith in the relationship and trust yourself and trust in the love they have for you is very difficult.
I think that's where the communication is extremely important. It's like, there's an individual that I am attracted to. I have been attracted to for some time, and I'm like, I really want to ask them out, and I'm like, I'm not going to. Yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, it's also your own anxieties and stuff that come into play. As far as my concern is it's
You
my
have
own
to be really
anxieties.
secure.
Yeah. Well, that's the secret. The real reason why I think so many people kind of shy away from poly is the level of communication that is expected. Like if you're not good at it, poly will only make you worse, or it might make you better at it. Um, but there is way more communication than just like when you're in a committed monogamous relationship, it's like, oh, I'm going to be, coming home a little bit late on Friday night, no big deal. But when you're in a poly relationship, then it's like, okay, so I'm not going to come home Friday night because I'm down at partner number two's place. And do you have dinner? Are you okay? There's just a lot more questions that need to be handled. Like, can you take care of the pets? Um, we have this meeting on Saturday morning. I'll be home in time. Just, and whenever you're just monogamous, there's like half that communication is needed. But when you're in a poly relationship, there's a lot of communication, and if you're bad at communication, it will show immediately.
Mhm.
Yeah, there's a lot more avoiding hurt feelings with multiple people. It just multiplies, I mean, exponentially compared to two people.
Yeah.
Because there's
Right.
more levels of misunderstanding. What was the plan?
And it's also, and I found this out, is like, what are things that are distinctly this partner's or this, this sections of the relationship versus this section. Like, there's a holiday or a date that is extremely important to this group that isn't to this part, with the hinge. Like, anniversaries, I guess, is the thing. It's like, I'm trying to think of other things, but it's like, this is important.
Christmas
Christmas.
is like the worst because Christmas is just a few hours or a day. And when you have two or more partners and all of them want you to spend that special time with their family, I hate the holidays so bad because inevitably somebody's feelings get hurt. Like, even if you're not trying to, somebody's feel, well, why can't I come to your mom's place? Or well, okay, I want to give you that. But this was a really special day for me, and there's only one day and one you and multiple partners to try to make happy. I hate the holidays. I hate them so bad. Every year I
Well,
just dread them.
it's the same with like birthdays too. It's like, one person's birthday, who are you going to spend that time with? If you're like how you described your relationship, you're the hinge, and it's like, who do you spend that birthday with, because both of the individuals that you're with are wanting to spend that same time with you, and it's a special day and everything else, and they want to do romantic stuff. Valentine's Day. Valentine's Day is one of those days that is just like, oh my God, what am I going to do? On my side, it's like, who am I going to spend time with and stuff like that. And I'm like, those are discussions that have to be had. And so I think
I
it's
think my
important.
broken up family prepared me, or my mixed family, and both prepared me well for that sort of thing, because I've had to lay down boundaries for so long with, you know, my kids have so many sets of grandparents. I have, like, Connor has, my eldest son has different grandparents than the rest of my sons, who are Rob's, and then there's my adopted daughter who's now part of the family, and you know, everybody wants to see, and my parents are divorced and my dad's remarried, and so there's always been all this jumbling around of who gets the kids when, and when we're doing different holidays with different people. And I mean, I guess in learning to protect their space and dignity and making it special time for them allows me to prioritize in a poly situation where, like, okay, this time is special to me, but can we arrange it to this time, and then everyone gets to have the best time? I mean, for me, I'd rather just everybody have one big party, but people can't behave in that, and so it's a wiggling it around so that each person just feels special about the time they are getting, like whether it's giving them the choice of which hours are more. It's like in poly relationships, like Google Calendar is your best friend, or any other scheduling tool where people get their input on which times they want, and then people can agree without avoiding hurt feelings as much as possible, but laying down the law with, like, all right, but this is my boundary. You can't demand my time. Like, we are all sharing time, and we have to love and respect each other enough that I stressing out about not giving you enough time isn't the way I want to share my time with anyone. Like, if you're demanding it of me, we're not going to enjoy our time.
Yes.
At that point it becomes a chore, and that's what these relationships are about. I want to briefly hit because there's I want to briefly hit on the religious side of it real quick. There is, and this goes for the sex work stuff, so I'm just going to lump them together. There is a shifting of thought. It's very slow, and seeing September as a former recovering Catholic, she understands how slow certain churches move on certain situations, and but there is a small shift about the poly thing and about same-sex marriage and about sex work and stuff like that. As far as the Bible is concerned, there is not a whole lot about it in there that is positive, but on the same thing, the Bible is the breath of God, but it is not the word of God. So these are men who wrote this down. So you have to understand that men were trying to control certain situations. As far as the polyamory is concerned, there's enough ambiguity between the Old Testament and New Testament where I personally feel that it's fine as long as it is committed relationships and it's a loving relationship, and and everything else. I'm a little more iffy about as far as biblical backing for open relationships versus poly, because of the aspect of the physicality. I'm not saying I'm not. Let me be clear. I'm not saying or discounting open relationships by any stretch of the means. I'm not, but I'm just saying on the biblical side of it, it ranges that it would be enough ambiguity for the polyamory to be okay the for as far as the Bible is concerned. Now, as far as sex work, and we'll transition in a minute, but real quick, there's no ambiguity. It's all no. So it's one of those things where it's like, all right, so we have
I
to kind of
disagree.
step. Well, we can
The
discuss that.
specific no, the only specific no on sex work that I know of in the Bible is the often misinterpreted part saying a man shall not lie with another man as he lies with a woman. And they are using the wrong terms for man and woman. They've twisted that around so they can use that against people in same sex relationships. However,
Well,
if you go back to the original terms, what they're actually referring to is the sex workers in the temples because they didn't want Christian didn't want they went you're worshiping this one god, so you can't go to the temple and pay to have sex with a priestess because that's forsaking your god. That's a worship thing. But there's no other condemnation that I have been able to find other than Christ talking about forgiving other people for any profession, and he mentions a lot of different ones, even though they not sex work in particular. But I don't see any condemnation of sex work in the Bible that you're referring to.
there it's Paul, I think, in First Corinthians that talks a bit about it, but
Okay.
it's one verse. It's like, again, it's one of those things. It's not something that is hugely talked about, and unless it is, and you're correct about the because of course you are about the discussion about not laying with someone because of the fact that it was a religious connotation. So, and as far as Paul is concerned, a lot of people look at it are starting to look at it more as like more power dynamics. You shouldn't like do this if you're the owner and they're the slave kind of situation versus
Yeah, that was my
prostitution.
understanding of the modern interpretation of what Paul was saying.
Yeah, so but I'm just saying that it's one of those. It's a little harder, but I support sex workers, so it's like uh, it's kind of like what Desmond Tutu once said years ago. If God is homophobic, then I don't want to go to heaven. Well, if God doesn't support certain things, maybe I don't want to go there. So that's my view on my faith and the faith of that. So, but
I'm so glad I don't have any of those hangups.
yeah, thanks, guys. It's like, look,
I just
I respect your
I
faith. It's just a little weird, dude.
I just rebelled so much after being subjected to 7 years of being a female child in fundamentalist Baptist Christian school. It's taken me a while to just even want to explore any Christian concepts anymore. I call it, 7 years of fundamentalist Baptist Christian school made me the pagan that I am today, and
Oh
that's
yeah.
kind of true. It was so repressive. It was so it was horrible to be a girl. I had the worst, lowest self-esteem. It created boundary issues. There was it took a lot to recover from that. So I kind of almost in some ways rejected a whole lot of that ideology completely, and maybe that's why I became polyamorous. I don't know. Something I'm still working on, but yeah, to just very quickly just to refocus a little bit more on what you were saying about what's in the Bible about poly. The one thing that when I was preparing for this talk tonight, I kept going back to thou shalt not covet. It's like if you're doing poly right, then nobody has to covet anything that a neighbor has. You just
Exactly.
like talk to the neighbor.
Like, hey,
So anyhow, that's my little throwing that back out there.
it's like, hey, are you in a, is your marriage open? I'm just curious because your wife is hot, or your husband's hot. It's like,
Or you're hot.
or yeah,
See, and that I love your point there, Meredith, because I mean the coveting, that's the dangerous part. And if you look at the sins that are cited as sins in the Bible, I mean sin's a stupid word, but there's pride and avarice, and it's those selfish feelings, and polyamory is not about that at all. It's this very open, like, hey man, I kind of like you, are you into me, and just everybody talking about it avoids things like coveting, jealousy. I mean, yes, you can feel jealous and when you're in a non-monogamous relationship, but it's like you get the tools to look at yourself and go, well, why am I having a problem with this?
right.
Yeah.
Like, am I just
What
actually
needs to not
envious
be
of the time they're spending? That's a completely different thing than being jealous and having avarice and coveting and punishing other people for it and being an asshole.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And that leads us into sex work. And it's not, in a way, because here's the thing about sex work, and I think why it's important that we respect, give dignity, and see that we should find ways to make this a lot more legal and not scary legal like in Nevada, is the fact that there are, I think we would have a lot less problems if we were a lot more sexually open to our sexual needs. I think that, and having someone to help guide those sexual needs as a sex worker would be beneficial for this nation, because I think a lot, and this is stupid, but I think in my brain it's like, well, that is a stupid statement, but I think if we can get over our Puritan natures when it comes to sex, I think we would find ourselves to be a lot more of an open society in general, a lot more understanding, a lot more giving, because we know what our needs and wants are on the primal level when it comes to sex. And I think sex workers do a wonderful job. Trust me, there are numerous women that I follow on Twitter that are sex workers, OnlyFans workers, and stuff like that. And I believe they're doing a lot of heavy lifting for the society, because they're giving first off, they're getting paid, they're finding their own independence, which I think is hugely important. If you can find your independence and not and be able to handle yourself in a financial way, um, do however you want. And if it brings you, it's just like the quote, if it brings you pleasure too, why not? That sounds like a great gig, you know, um, if you're enjoying yourself,
When
I would,
I when I was doing pro dame work, I found that a lot of people, they just wanted to talk to somebody that was not going to judge them. One of my favorite clients, he just wanted to rub my feet. That was it. He would pay for an hour of time to come in. He'd come in and he'd sit on the floor at my feet, and he'd use oil and massages, and it was wonderful, and he was so attentive, and we would have the best conversations, and I would be there like, honey, why don't you do this for your wife? This feels really good. You shouldn't have to pay for this. And he was there like, oh no, I could never admit to my wife that she would think I was weird, and I couldn't talk to her about this. And I just felt that was so sad. Like, it's such a simple thing to make another person happy. I just don't understand why we as a society have to be so repressed and sad all the time. I mean, the world is a crap place right now. Like, for almost 3 years, it's been really bad. So what is wrong with people feeling good about themselves and allowing another person to contribute to society monetarily and pay their bills? If you can't talk to your partner about your needs, then I just think there's something incredibly freeing and good in that, that society should really reconsider their position on some things.
Yeah, stigmatizing intimacy and repressing, one's own emotions are inarguably dangerous to society and to individuals. But they
And
add
it,
to this just
go ahead.
stigmatizing entire industry and entire groups of people.
Well, and it also leads back to the polyamory thing as well. It kind of connects. That's why I wanted to do them both at the same time, because of that communication that you had to have with your partners and everything else. And some partners do certain things and feel certain niches and stuff like that. It's the same with the sex workers. Sex work. I worked as a videographer for burlesque for God knows how many years, and it was never a turn on for me, but it was enjoyable because I saw it as an art form. Now some people saw it as a turn on, and I will be honest with you, I've only the only time that I've ever gotten sexually turned on was when I went and saw and I am going to mispronounce her name. Vita, no, it's Dita Von
Dita Von
Teese.
Teese?
Yes. I got to see her live here in Charlotte, and oh my god. Like, okay, so yeah, but on the same thing, it's a beautiful art form as well. Meredith Sparkles does a couple of pieces that I absolutely to this day will call some of the best works of art I have ever seen. I would put it up to Mona Lisa, especially her Roxanne. If you've not seen that, I think it's on your YouTube channel.
It's on YouTube. It is.
And oh my god, that is Mona Lisa level art, and it is absolutely beautiful, and I love it to this day. And I've seen it several times, and I've seen it on YouTube several times, and it is just one of those things where I'm like, this is amazing. More people need to see this kind of art because it is an art form. I think it's an art form first, but it also is sexual titillation as well, and that's perfectly fine. I have no problems with that. It's okay to stimulate that part of your brain. In fact, it's important. Um, and it's someone called me out on this because I mentioned this, and I'm going to say this. It's tangential. The Lord of the Rings TV series is coming out soon, and they had mentioned the fact that they may have some love scenes, and I was all aghast. And then someone called me out. It's like, you're okay with them butchering thousands of orcs, but not a love scene? And I'm going, wow. Even I have Puritan instincts, and that's the thing with movies. You can a PG-13 movie can have people's arms blow off, but if you show any flesh that is considered sexual, you're automatically an R rating at that point, and that's why we should be more comfortable with the naked body than we should be with blowing people to smithereens.
I saw my first pussy shot on TV last night.
What were you watching? Euphoria? That
No,
TV show?
because I mean, a lot of shows. I mean, when you do get full frontal, and I'm a cord cutter on all our streaming services, and there's plenty of schlongs flying around here and there, but you never see female genitalia. And it was on the Suicide Squad spinoff, the Peacemaker.
Peacemaker?
On Peacemaker, there's a scene where one of the workers, she's flipping through doing okay, here's a senator we're gonna kill briefing, and her girlfriend had sent her a pic, and it was there in the shot, and everybody saw it, and then like everybody was joking like, oh my god, girl, and I didn't even know that you were on that team or whatever. But it occurred to me, I was like, that's awesome. Like, kudos to you, DC, because it never happens. It's just a weird stigma.
What was it, like a close up, or
Oh
was it
yeah.
just like, okay? And see, that's a little different. Like the first time I am dating myself a little bit. One of the first times that I remember seeing female frontal nudity was in Interview with the Vampire, the one with Tom Cruise.
Hmm.
There's a scene where they strip a young lady naked on stage, and then of course the vampires kill her. Spoiler alert. But the camera pans out when she's completely naked, and I think that was like one of the first times that I can remember seeing female frontal nudity in it on the big screen, like in the movie theater, because I did see it in the theaters.
Yeah, this was on television, on streaming, and it was a like on the iPad equivalent of dick pic
Well, that's
version.
amazing. That's
Yeah,
actually that's really amazing. We've come a long way, baby.
right?
Yeah. I think the first time I saw full frontal female nudity in a movie was, I think it was Shanna of the Jungle. I think that was the name of it. My father and I were sitting there watching HBO, and this was rated PG at the time, and comes out of the water completely naked, and my father's going, "Well, I wasn't expecting that, son." And it's like, "Neither was I, Dad. Can we turn the channel? I feel uncomfortable with this conversation." But on the same thing, and again, it's like, my father comes walking in. He worked at the post office, and of course, back in the day, when we had things called magazines, um, they would be some certain magazines that would come through that didn't have any labels to be shipped to certain places, and one of them my father brought home one, and it was the Playboy issue of Drew Barrymore, because he knew how much I loved Drew Barrymore, and he threw it at me. He's like, "Oh, I get to have the cover." It's like, "No, this is yours." And I'm like, "I'm not sure I want to have this discussion with you, Father. I'm going to go to my room."
That's so awesome of him, though.
It
Yeah.
was, and I thanked him later, because it's like, it's Drew Barrymore, and he knows how much I've since I was 6 years old, I've crushed on Drew Barrymore. So it's like, she's just so adorable.
I
Oh
don't
my
suppose
gosh.
you had
Anyway,
that
sorry.
issue.
But sex work is important, and I think here. And I posted some things about feminism and sex work, because there is a discussion in feminism, and I am going to bow out of this part of it, where is sex work empowering? Is it, that kind of situation? And there's been arguments on both sides of the feminist spectrum about this, and I am a feminist, but I am not female, so I am going to let you two ladies discuss this.
For me, I think like many things, it depends on the situation. A person doing OnlyFans for themselves, from their house or with a web camera, i- and interacting and making their own content and reaping the financial benefits of that themselves, then I can see where that would be very empowering. It would give you a safe way, particularly in you want to talk about working from home. That's amazing. It would be a safe way during the pandemic for you to make somewhat serious cash, and if it's going to you and that's your job, then yes, I can see that that is incredibly empowering. But if we're talking about, say, the classic situation of somebody on the street corner with a pimp who is collecting the money, and or if we're talking about a trafficking situation where the person really has either been so gaslit that they don't realize that they're being used, or a situation where they can't get away or they don't control what they're doing, then that's not empowering. So I think it's just like a lot of things in life, it could really go either way, and largely varies on a case by case basis.
Well, and that's, I mean, decriminalization, I think, can go a long way. I mean, but we have to be careful, right? Because it is complicated. I was reading one of the articles, Barty put up, and the National Organization of Women is against it, but all their arguments are very much about, well, as long as you continue to objectify people, it's dangerous. And then if you decriminalize it, it's more victimization. It's like, well, I don't necessarily agree with that because along with decriminalization, you can do things like they have in places where it is decriminalized, have regulations in place as well. Once it's not against the law, you can put things in place where those folks can be protected in their work. They can be protected from their privacy can be more easily protected, and everyone in the situation, if you're buying sex, you can get healthcare and testing and things like that, where consent is no longer a question set up with it. And that's like an amazingly empowering idea to me, as a woman, like that it becomes a legitimized option.
Yeah.
Can do away with all those people that would victimize women who go into it out of desperation. If it's a legitimate job choice, I think it circumvents those people that are, doing harm in the industry and gaslighting, young people, for instance, and victimizing them in the fields.
Yeah, I agree.
And it and it also comes back to just giving women autonomy of their body again. And we're having that discussion in this nation still about that. Um, Whereas, like in Germany, for example, they have whole districts that are full, and they're more than just Germany. Germany always pops in my head about that, but they have whole districts set up for prostitution and stuff like that, and it's very regulated. They make sure that no one is, they check on the staff. They have private interviews with them to make sure that they're not being abused, stuff like that. And I think that's an extremely important part of it, and everything else is to make sure on that front. Also, making sure that they get health care, not only just physical health care, but I think mental health care is important because it's still a job. It can still be stressful, and you get people that are still assholes, and you have to make sure that they're all protected in that situation. And it's at that point, that's why there's a bouncer at strip clubs to make sure that whatever asshole shows
I
up,
mean, if you have a
they
booking agent, aka pimp, you need to be able to
Yeah.
make sure you get your cut and be protected.
Well, even when I was a pro dom, my roommate, who was a male roommate at the time, he would listen out in his room. We had a baby monitor set up, so that he could hear what was going on, and I had a a safe word of my own that if he heard come up, it was, one of those safe words like, that you wouldn't really come up in any sort of conversation. But if I used that word, he knew that he was supposed to come in. So, but, there again, he was basically my employee. I would give him a cut of what I made that night for providing that service. So yeah, like if you're a sex worker that's going to be anywhere closer than a computer screen, then definitely part of it is making sure that you're safe. So there's that gray area again. Like you really, I think, have to look at it on a case by case basis. Like how much control does the sex worker have versus how much control does the people who are booking her or protecting her have over the whole thing as far as trying to determine whether it's empowering or not.
Right. I think one of the things that I would like to see, for example, is kind of treat it like a hair salon, where you rent a space, like you rent a chair at a hair salon, you rent a space, that's your space for when you're doing that work, and part of that rent is that you get the protection that you need, and then you get everything else, but the rents have to be fair, stuff like that, and of course that all has to be put into legal terms. But I think that is one of the ways to kind of help with that situation as well, is to make sure that there is a specific space that you can go to that is safe. It's not your home. And make sure that that it is a safe space on both the physical side but also on the financial side, that they're not taking advantage of you. I think that would be probably the best way. And then that way you can book your own people, or if you want to, you can, depending on how it's all set up. But I think the legalese on that front, I think, is where would probably be the most uniform and easy to do. And I also think at that point you can unionize, because this channel is big on unions. Unionize the sex workers at that point. Make sure they have a union. I think that's extremely. I think Germany, if I'm not mistaken, I know that I've heard of a unionized sex work someplace, and I think that's extremely important as well.
Can you imagine if sex workers were regulated like cosmetologists are, where they would have to like take courses and pass a certification, presumably of like safe sex practices and CPR training and things like that? Can you imagine how crazy that would seem, and yet also how awesome that would seem? Like all of the sex workers would be protected, their customers would be protected. It could all be taxes could be paid on it.
Yeah,
It's really not all that crazy when you really think about it,
I love
except for
that
that whole
idea.
stigma of the whole thing.
Yeah, there is an international union of sex workers. And their tagline is "Only rights can stop the wrongs."
See, and here's the thing: sex work. I'm just for a second. Sex workers can get a union, but video game employees can't. I'm just yeah, all right, fine. Yeah. But no, I think I agree with Meredith on that. Is that I think that's a great idea. Make sure they're licensed. Make sure that they know these certain things. They're tested every so often to make sure that they're or they're checked up on. So every so often, make sure that they're checked up on and can do all of this stuff. So I think that's extremely important
And then it's
for their
normalized, and the skill set is normalized, and the pay grade can be normalized, so
right.
that people can make a living.
Right. And you can still get and those individuals who have certain kinks and stuff like that can definitely get those kinks out and everything else, you know,
It's an
that
I
they
interesting
may
turn of phrase to use for it, but okay.
I've actively encouraged my partners. There are some things that I won't do. It's not because I find them dirty or distasteful. It's just not something I'm into. I'm a top, and my my partners, they tend to be switches or bottoms sometimes, and I don't. If they want like really heavy play, I I love them. I if it's a stranger, I can hurt them as hard as they want to be hurt. But if it's somebody that I love, I have a hard time doing that because I love them, and that's a me thing. That's a hang up on me. So I encourage them to seek out a pro dominee, or somebody that's qualified, so that they can go and they can have that heavy play experience that they want, and I don't have to feel bad that I've hurt something I love. It's kind of it's definitely one of those things that I've actually actively encouraged my partners to do, if they felt the need and wanted to.
so no closet land on your partners, is that what I'm
No.
It's for those who don't know, that's it was an Amnesty International movie that starred Alan Rickman.
Yes.
And I cannot remember the female actress to save my life. Meredith showed me that movie, and I'm like, well, that was intense, and I'm like, okay, but
It's out of print, and it was only released on VHS, but you can find it on YouTube.
It's metal and
But
stowe.
it's intense. Make sure you're in a good headspace when you watch it. But it's actually a lot of fun. It's a very, very fun mental kind of scene. It's very interesting.
she also showed me The Secretary, and I think you showed me the Drive movie, the first one, not the Academy Award winning, but the first one. I
Oh, the
think you
crash.
Crash. I mean, yes, I
That was
think
it.
you.
Yes.
Yeah, I think you showed me both of those movies, and I'm like,
Oh,
I'm a little.
James Spader. Oh, James Spader.
But yeah, she also showed me The Secretary. I'm like, oh, okay, so that's what this is. Oh, okay, so she was Meredith was giving me an education because I on dominating and stuff like that, and I'm like, okay, all right, I get it now. So that's part of our friendship is that those situations. But at this point, um, any final thoughts on the subject?
Well, my final thoughts are just basically, I know that coming at this from like a biblical point of view, can be problematic because it seems like a lot of men, and by men I mean like the human race, interprets a lot of things in the Bible to be anti-sex. Very, like it's a dirty thing that people shouldn't engage in. But I mean, sex is where we all came from. So, uh, I guess just you have to kind of look inside yourself and your own soul and kind of figure out what makes sense and what somebody else is interpreting and kind of not be a sheep. That's kind of like my thought on it.
Yeah, I think the Bible does not give any clear guidance for relationships. I mean, you go through the Old Testament, New Testament, and oh well, you know, my wife died, so I'll just take her cousin, or somebody's not,
My
and all the
daughters.
concubines and the daughters and like whatever, and then the other parts are like, well, you can only have sex on this day with your wife, and the Catholics are really, really repressed about it, and I don't think it's where we should go for relationship advice. I don't go to the Bible for much, but the very basic guidances of how to just be excellent to each other. Jesus came around and apparently had been hanging out with Bill and Ted, and it's like do unto others as you'd want do unto you, and leaves things better than you found it. So you're not going to break any major commandments if you are ethically um, engaging in sex wars or polyamory or sex in general.
And I will say this is like the Song of Solomon or the Song of Songs is very erotic, and you should hear it read by James Earl Jones. That's all I have to say about that. It's like, oh my god, it's just like I okay. It's like listening to Barry White sing it. It's like, but yes. So while there's not a lot of relationship advice, I think that sex in itself is very beautiful and doesn't have to be for procreation, for creating babies. Because I can't say the other word. It can be for beautiful, fun times. Why is it so sensitive down there if it's not for fun? Have some fun, and go with your heart. Make sure that whatever you're doing, if you're going to decide to do a poly relationship, that you do the research. There's research out there to make sure you know what needs to be done as far as the communications and everything else, and make sure you are protecting yourself on as much of a legal basis. And if you're doing sex work, we applaud you. Hope you're safe, and hope that you're doing well, and that you're not doing anything, that you're not being forced into it, and that this is something you want to do, and if you do it, we support you. So that is the show's official status on that.
Yeah, on that note, I would like I'll put some in, and I'm sure Meredith and Barney both have resources that we can put on the website and in our postings for the podcast where people can do research on these things.
Very much so. So
Yes.
at this point, let's do our carrot and stick.
Me. What's up, Doc?
So I love this. This new company is making non-recyclable plastics into building blocks. If anybody who follows anything about recycling knows, we've got way more plastic than we can ever do anything with. And then you go to the recycling center and they only take two kinds, and the rest of it is really ending up in the landfill anyway. Well, this is an LA based startup, and they're just taking stuff that would go into landfills. They made 103 tons of otherwise non recyclable plastics into these blocks The company's called Bifusion, Byfusion, and they have these machines they've patented. They're called blockers. So other places can buy these machines in your, whatever area you live in to create these blocks that you can make buildings out of. And they can
That's
do anything but like styrofoam or polystyrene.
And that's absolutely wonderful, and that's something that I'm glad to see. I know there's been a lot of technology movement as far as like 3D printers printing buildings, and if we can somehow get these two to work together, that would be absolutely amazing. But right now, even just this is just absolutely amazing as far as the environment is concerned.
I'm in love with this because I mean it doesn't even use glue, it doesn't use heat, it just uses pressure to create this. This is a fantastic solution to clean things up and
Eh,
make stuff out of it. And they look like it's so Minecraft.
So the stick. So last week we talked about how white people didn't want to feel any anxiousness in Florida about race discussion of race or whatever. Tennessee decided to say I'm sorry.
Don't you blaspheme in here. Don't you blaspheme in here.
So the stick goes to because Tennessee basically is like hold my beer and basically decided to ban a Holocaust comic. Um, and it's done in an art style. It's done in a very interesting art style. It's a cats and mice kind of situation, so it kind of makes it more understandable for people, especially children and stuff like that. And Tennessee is like, oh, we can't have this in here because it talks about Nazis and our state's full of them. I mean, we shouldn't make white people feel bad about Nazis. So I'm like,
Yeah, and you know what? My son Victor read this in school. It was part of the curriculum. They at my kids' school they kind of put lessons together, so they were learning about World War II, and then in the English class adjacent, like at the same time, they were reading Mouse.
and I don't it's like I thought we agreed the Nazis were bad and now we're banning anti-Nazi stuff. I'm conflicted. I'm not really. No, they've been moving this way for a while now. So anyway, so yes,
Well,
that
the reason supposedly was because of its unnecessary use of profanity and nudity in its depiction of violence and suicide. It was too adult oriented. Like, no. It's like I'm so tired of having this argument with people that want to ban books. Because the same thing happened at my kids' school. They tried to ban I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. Whew, who can I talk today? And there was like, well, it describes a penis. And it's like, if you think your teenagers don't know what nudity is, you've got a whole nother set of problems that has nothing to do with their being taught in school, but what you're not teaching at home.
yes.
Like, that's a bullshit excuse.
So that Tennessee school board definitely gets the stick because we're not supposed to side with the Nazis. So that's our show today. I want to thank Meredith Sparkles for joining us today. You were an amazing guest. We greatly appreciate everything that you added to the conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. I had a wonderful time.
With that, thank you for joining us at Heresy and Hearsay. I'm Reverend Barney, and you can follow me on Twitter at SethRothII. Oh, wait, before I do that, let me back up. Where can we find you on the internet?
You couldn't have asked her after you said yours so that my editing
Yeah.
isn't stupid.
On the internet, I can be found at meredithsparkles.com for my website. At Twitter, I'm at MYSTRYS69. And on Facebook, I am Meredith Sparkles.
All right, now I can do this, and I'm sorry to my producer slash editor. I'm sorry. Thank you thank you again for joining us at Heresy and Hearsay. I'm Reverend Barney, and you can follow me on Twitter at SethRothII. You can also find the show on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and any podcast catcher, as well as our website. Just Google us. Don't forget our Patreon page, where $2 a month can keep us going. And this is how I pay my bills.
And I'm September. You can follow me on Twitch and Twitter at 9 of 12 and hear me on the Geek Grills podcast. Thanks for listening today, and bless your hearts.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.
Okay. Excuse me. End the stream.